Hello, folks. Welcome to Education Matters. Today we have a special guest, Dr. Julianne Cooper from Liberty Harbor Academy, president and founder. And today we're going to be talking about some of the issues surrounding the Office of Civil Rights case that we've just been got word of from the Manchester School District. And there are many aspects to that, and we touched a little bit last week with our school board member, Robin Dunphy. However, now that we've received the announcement from the U.S. Department of Education and other documents pertaining to this case, we'll go into a little more detail about that and talking to Julianne Cooper about how, is this something that we need to be concerned about? Is this something that's going to resolve itself some way when they talk about de-leveling of our system here in Manchester? Julianne, do you have any thoughts about this?
De-leveling.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. De-leveling. It's a way of putting everybody on the same playing field, except it isn't. At Liberty Harbor, we have de-leveled. Everybody takes the same courses. Everybody is expected to do the same work. And then if they happen to be not the world's greatest writer, they may need a little more writing work, or somebody else might need some help in reading. But they're expected to do the same level across the board, eventually. Not everyone is good at everything. So when we get to the public schools and we begin to put people into levels where a teacher can actually work with them at the level where they are, it really separates out, and I do understand completely. I know that kids in high school start to talk about the smart kids and the dumb kids. I know that happens mainly because the philosophy is that there are smart kids and dumb kids. That our testing system works against the students who are not proficient in English. It doesn't test on things that they are proficient on. So when we put kids who are leveled at a lower level because they're not being able to do the work that the high school and the public schools think is an important work at this level. Frankly, if you threw me into a Hebrew class, I would not be doing very well, but I have a dual PhD and a couple of master's degrees. So am I leveled into the lower levels and that makes me dumb because I don't speak Hebrew? And what we're doing in the public schools, two things today. We are leveling, but we're the students are not getting the same kind of education. So what you're dealing with here and what this is about is, are they going to be able to get the same kind of education? But we're not going to be able to do that with 2,000 kids in a school, 28 kids in a classroom,
one
teacher, and put kids from, and I hate leveling, frankly. I think the idea is we need to pay attention to individuals, but we can't do that in the way the schools are set up. And when you put in a curriculum that everybody has to know, you're not giving the students who have particular penchants for areas of thought that are not in that curriculum a chance. There is nowhere for them to go. Just as there was nowhere for Einstein to go. I mean, he was dyslexic and thought to be retarded. So we need to stop that kind of curriculum. The problem is that if you're going to have a curriculum that everybody does the same thing in the curriculum, you're going to end up with either students who do poorly and students who do well in that curriculum.
And the one size fits all.
Right. It doesn't work.
That's
and
what
it's
they're talking about.
It's just never going to
With
work.
the Common Core, the one size
Right.
fits all. And do you
Well,
see?
it is today too in the school system.
Yeah.
I mean,
For the outcome to be, well, this workforce training.
this is another thing. Don't get me going on the workforce training. Literally, workforce training, education, does exactly the opposite for our students that they need in the workforce. In the workforce, they need to be able to make decisions for themselves and to go out and do their solve problems be able to make up what they need to do and do it. In college and in high school, they're given answers, and they need to know the right answer. Well, I've had business owners complain that they hire these kids, and the kids will finish whatever they've been told to do, and then they will find them sitting on the side waiting to be told what to do. That's exactly the curriculum in high school, where it's give me the right answer. That's not what we need for workforce. What we need for workforce is find me the question. So we're not preparing them, and Common Core is anything but preparing them for the workforce. It's not about a particular skill, it's about the ability to think through and make decisions. And that's what's not happening. And it's not going to happen any better with AP courses.
They just say that, we just need to train the teachers with the development, professional development. That's all the teacher needs in the classroom. And she'll do fine.
Well, what the teacher needs in the classroom is a broad-ranging education that allows them to go in the direction that the students need to go. Rather than bringing the students into line with a particular curriculum, we need to be able to follow the students where they need to go.
Rather than have the minimum standard,
right.
Which
and
is
the
Common
question that
Core.
I was asking you before the show came on, what happens to AP then, as far as the colleges are concerned, if they get college credit for AP courses, and we have students who are not reaching the grade, but we need to make sure that they're in there in order to satisfy. Right. So what do we do with AP at that
They're
point?
getting rid of the grades, the A, B, and C. So then there won't be any disparities between the A students in AP and the C students in AP, from what I understand. If there's no grades, they just get pass or fail.
But grades are artificial too, and very subjective. We try to make them objective. We try to do things, give these objective
Criteria.
tests and criteria, and this proves. But proving that a student can give you the right answer on a test, and putting a student in a position where they have the opportunity to do something and they need to ask the right questions in order to be able to do it. We're not teaching people to do this. We're not teaching teachers to teach this way. We're teaching teachers
Teach to the test.
teach to the test and get the answer right. And literally getting the answer right. I mean, I taught for 25 years in higher education, and I had students come in because I don't teach to a test. We didn't have tests. We had projects that they had to work on. And we would have students say, well, what's the answer? Well, what do you want here? What do you want on this paper? I want your thoughts in comparing Machiavelli and Marx. And they couldn't do it. I mean, it was, I don't know, how can I do that? Well, you read Machiavelli and you read Marx, and then you start to say, well, he thinks this way and he thinks this way. Well, I don't like Machiavelli. It doesn't matter whether you like it or not. It happens to be a primary source that has been used throughout history. So it's a matter of whether or not you can figure out how to ask questions between those two writers. Well, Common Core Common Core is another thing we talked about, is getting rid of all of the literature that's including Shakespeare, because it's not important anymore, evidently. I would say, frankly, that it's more important than most of the other stuff that's being taught, because it teaches you about human nature and about working with people, which is the whole point of getting a job and making things happen. So you had some other statements from...
the meaning of equal opportunity.
Yes.
Is there a meaning to equal opportunity? And is this the way to go about it? Or do we...
Well, opportunity is something
Or is it artificial?
that one I think it's a made up, another one of the made up terms, because opportunities come to all of us all the time, and it's whether we have the ability to recognize an opportunity. Simply saying we're giving everybody equal opportunities doesn't mean that everybody will be able to recognize it as an opportunity. And certainly we're going to put some students in these AP courses, if we're going through with this, who are not going to view having expectations beyond their perceived ability
Yeah, why do
as
they
being
need
an
it?
opportunity.
Do they know that, or how do they know that they need AP?
Well,
Because what is
they can barely get through what they're doing now.
where are they going with AP?
Right. So the question becomes, how do you deal with a young person who doesn't even yet know what it means to see an opportunity and then to have the self-confidence to be able to go after it? So we can certainly offer AP courses, which I think is what if I read this correctly from the superintendent, is what Manchester schools are going to do, is to open AP courses to allow people to choose to take an AP course or not. However, how are they going to structure the AP course with students in it that don't have the background or don't have the foundational material to be able to do it? I mean, there's an assumption here that an AP course is just a different conglomeration of facts that can be learned, rather than that there has to be some sort of foundational material that the students have sort of under their belt to be able to do this.
To function in that class.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And how are we going to give them that?
And what is a teacher going to do when she has maybe diverse... And the diversity is not a problem, but when she receives the different levels of academic proficiency,
Right.
and now she's going to have to level within AP, perhaps, to try to tutor this one,
Right.
and to help give this one what he needs or she needs to excel. And is this too much to ask from the teacher?
Well, I think it's too much to ask from teachers who are trained to teach to a test. And we're teaching Common Core now in the teacher training programs. We're teaching teachers to teach Common Core.
Mm.
And once you start to teach to the test or that particular curriculum, it's going to be very difficult to be able to give a diverse group of students different kinds of ways to look at things that are going to sort of click in for them. And we're not giving students in the public schools things to think about. We're not really engaging their brains. They're bored. I mean, if I hear once, I hear over and over again that high school students are bored. They don't know why they're sitting in the school for 6 or 8 hours a day. They're not there 6 hours a day. I mean, I'm sitting here, I'm bored out of my mind. I'm not interested in what is being taught. I just want to get out of here and do something. I have ADHD. I have anxiety.
I'm on drugs.
I'm on drugs. I'm on all kinds of, and well, that's because they're bored. And once you give students something to use their brains with, they begin to behave differently and see things differently and ask different questions.
I think that they're actually going to be counseled early on, probably before high school,
Right.
on a workforce track or a track for work.
Well, we all should be on a track for work. I mean,
But
that's the point of college too, right?
To choose a career.
Right. I mean, isn't that what we tell
Some
college
kids go for liberal arts. They don't know what they want to
Yeah,
do
but
or where
do you-
they want to work.
Do you know that liberal arts was originally invented as the first business education? It was invented by the Greeks because they had a middle class who were not aristocrats, not inheriting money, and they weren't slaves. They weren't owned by somebody and being told what to do. So there were this group of people who needed to be able to find their own way in the world. And it couldn't be too narrow Because what if opportunities came in other areas, in other ways? So the liberal arts was invented by the Greeks literally as a middle-class business education. It was for the children of the merchant class to get them ready to sort of face the world, take on the world. And it was reinvented in the Renaissance when we grew this huge middle class of business people
I see.
who needed an education that would give them wide-ranging ability to think, understand, see opportunities, and to solve their own problems. So the liberal arts education is actually business education. It is to make you ready to take on whatever comes your way.
So now can you tell us a little bit about why workforce training now is the accent of everything?
Because we've forgotten, or we have not, certainly in the last 40 or 50 years, we've forgotten what a real education does for people.
Is it just because the business community?
No, it's because after World War II, we had a whole lot of soldiers who came back, and the government created the GI Bill. And the GI Bill would go to colleges. If you look at the number of colleges founded, immediately after World War II, you'll see that there are a whole lot of business schools and small schools founded. Vocational schools in order to get people ready to take advantage of the government money. And the, quote, business education was invented because it was much quicker and much easier to do than a full liberal arts education.
Mm-hmm.
So now we have this business. I mean, I would argue that there shouldn't be any such thing as a business education, because everybody, including me, I mean, I started taking jobs long before I had a degree, and I had no problem. If somebody showed me what to do, I understood it and I did it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't need to go to business school to do that. And most companies will train people to do what they want them to do. And I ran an advertising agency for 15 years. And I would not hire people with marketing and advertising degrees or business degrees.
Oh, that's interesting.
Well, they didn't know enough. They couldn't make connections. They didn't have enough art background, even as an account executive, to be able to see how things work together. They didn't understand poetry. They didn't understand literature. They didn't understand human nature.
They would say, why do I need to know that for an advertising job?
Right, except what is look at the ad. I mean, my husband and I sit and pull apart ads all the time. And some of the people know something because they make innuendo and they have, it rains when things are going to change. A whole bunch of things happen. If you know this, you have a whole different understanding and attitude about life and about what you do every day and about where you live.
So the opportunities that Common Core and the workforce training, and is that going to narrow a person's, is that what you're trying to say, that narrow their vision of life and the world around them?
Of course. I mean, it can't do otherwise.
And they're just pigeonholed?
Right. And what's going to happen is we're going to get people who wait to be told what to do. And this was exactly what the liberal arts, in fact, were invented. It's called liberal arts because it is the arts or the education for people who are liberated, free people, who are not under somebody's thumb and being told what to do.
Oh my goodness.
And what we're doing is reversing that. We're creating we've been doing it for a while, we're creating a factory output. Everybody's supposed to be able to have the stamp of approval that they know this and get their high school diploma. But high school kids today, well, college kids today, have no clue. They don't know anything. I can't believe you can't sit down and have a conversation with them because they've never heard of anything. They don't understand the Constitution or the Bill of Rights or
Classic literature.
Any classic literature, any references to classic literature. They go to see a movie. My husband and I go see a movie, and for instance, one that is pretty violent, in fact, is all I can think of is Convict Air. I can't think of it at the moment. But it's a conversation between Thomas Hobbes and John Locke on Enlightenment political thinking. And they actually use quotes from Hobbes and Locke, who are 17th century writers, who our kids in Liberty Harbor have read. They would hear it. They would get it.
Understand the plot.
And would understand it completely differently than...
person who has no idea
No.
what those are
No.
referencing.
No. And suddenly, I mean, the kids at
They'd
Liberty
lost
Harbor...
the whole context of the movie.
Right. Well, but whoever wrote the movie knew Hobbes and Locke and understood that what was going on was a question of whether mankind was free to make their own decisions from society or whether society made the decisions for them. And that's what it's an argument about.
Exactly.
If you don't know that, and then people will say, well, what do I need that for? I'm going to get a job in business. Okay. Suppose that you have a new client and you desperately want to get this client, and you know Aristotle and Plato and all these classical thinkers, and you understand how they thought and how the opposite things. If you find out that the person that you're dealing with is Hobbesian, and you're Lockean, and you're giving everything to them Lockean, and they're really thinking Hobbesian, you're not going to be very successful. But if you can identify those things immediately, the nature of man, if you have a real understanding, you will be so much more successful, because it's not about whether you can draw a graph.
Right.
It's about whether or not you can interact and think.
With the client.
Right. So
Potential client.
the more successful people are going to be those who have the ability to put those things together. And they're not going to have, I mean, they're actually being taken out of Common Core.
Now, they talk about the barriers, like these levels being barriers to the performance, to someone rising
Right.
and having more performance or a higher level of performance, that they're just being held back. And we've heard people on Facebook, teachers in fact, who have said, this is not true.
No.
This is not happening in Manchester. Students are not being held back. And that the guidance counselors or the teachers are well aware that a student doesn't belong in this level, that they should be in it's not rocket science, okay? And so we have this huge case made now in the district, and it probably will follow in many other districts, because they'll be afraid now, like, oh no, we don't want the Office of Civil Rights on our back, and so now we must fall in line because we have a precedent case here.
Right.
And the whole thing is going to be turned on its head. And I think Manchester, the parents are going to have to decide again, is this good for Manchester, this de-leveling? Is this good for everybody?
Leveling is about the only way you can deal with 2,000 students in a school.
With the number of teachers we have.
And the number of immigrants that places like Manchester have.
To try to get them the individual attention
Right.
that they need to excel actually faster than
Yeah.
just by osmosis in a classroom that's heterogeneous grouping.
Well, this is what makes no sense to me, is this idea that if we put everybody in the same situation and give them the same information the same way, they'll all be equal. This is absurd.
Right.
I mean, some people are more equal in, this is John Locke's argument, some people are more equal in their physical ability, some people are more equal in their artistic ability or their philosophical ability. Yes, we all have talents, but simply putting people through a program that is meant to make sure everybody goes through exactly the same program at exactly the same level does not. I mean, it probably kills the spirit of more people than it actually does anything good for.
Wow, that's too bad. Well, we have to figure out, I think, or at least educate the people, like what is happening
I went to
to
a
their
high school. I
district.
graduated in a high school. I had over 600 students graduated in my high school. I think it was a very good high school. In fact, when I got to college, I had already done a lot of the material that I was being given at college. So, and it was a public high school. Public high schools don't do this anymore. Public high schools aren't like this anymore. They're much more regimented, much more well, from political correctness to multiculturalism to all of these overlays of social concepts that don't enhance anything.
The student's individuality.
No, they enhance nothing. And what they do is stifle the truth. They stifle the ability of a teacher to say to a student, you're not making it in this area, and you're probably not going to make it in this area because you've been working at this. Why don't you try this area, which is much more your area and much more your kind of ideas? Get them to excel at something. But you can't give everybody a reward, give everybody a ribbon, give everybody a trophy for participating, because everybody knows they didn't do anything.
Right, and so we're talking about the next level, which is college.
Right.
And what's going to happen on that level? Okay, if this is what's happening here, what's going to happen
But it is
there?
leveled at college. People just take the course and either flunk it or not.
Right.
And except that the number of remedial courses now at college, I mean, college is the new high school
Oh, no.
for the most part. I was there for 25 years. And in fact, my husband and I developed the curriculum for Liberty Harbor in the college classroom because we would get students who had never been exposed to anything they could think about. And they had only been told to look for answers. So we had to develop, if these kids are going to graduate from college, at least they have to have one course that turns their brain on and says, maybe that's not the truth just because somebody says it. Maybe I need to ask questions. So we developed a curriculum that kids within a semester could do that. We could make that happen. Mainly by just giving them stuff to think about that really required them
And
to
that they
think
weren't
about
going to
it.
be tested on.
No, the
Not
kids.
teaching to the test.
No, the kids wrote. Actually, the students wrote the quizzes every week, and the group that wrote the quiz was graded on the writing of the quiz, so they couldn't write silly stuff. And we do that at Liberty Harbor. The students write the quizzes.
Isn't that interesting?
Yes.
Not Pearson,
No.
not the AP board.
No. But the students really take it seriously, and they really like doing this. It gives them ownership of their education. And this does not give anybody ownership of anything except the Civil Rights Board or the Manchester School Board or...
It seems rather vicious. In some ways, it seems vicious, and it doesn't seem to me that there's going to be a good outcome by all of the what do they call it? Dr. Livingston's resolution here. We have 1 minute left, and so Dr. Livingston, I think we have 11 pages there of
the resolution from the school district.
of what the district's going to do.
Right.
And, well, folks, you can go online. You can see the education documents there. Just the U.S. Department of Education.
Right.
Just put Manchester, New Hampshire, probably in the search. It'll come up. And on Facebook, obviously, we have Ask the School Board. You can go there and look at the Facebook page, and there's people putting in their input, asking questions like, what does all this mean? How's this going to be good for Manchester? How's this going to be good for the kids? And all the whole 9 yards. But it's an ongoing conversation.
And I would say to all of you, make sure that you look at Common Core and look it up.
And see what your kids are learning.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being with us and offering your input here. It's so important. And thank you. We'll see you next time on Education Matters. Thank you.